Today we're going to try to find out, is Washington State going to send the unvaccinated to COVID quarantine camps down in Lewis County? Let's find out. Thank you for watching. My name's Glen Morgan, and this is We the Govern. So we are in Washington State exploring this question, and as always, we are under the eternal lockdown and endless emergency that Governor Inslee has put the state. And as a trigger warning to anybody who is new to We the Governed or who is new to this video and wondering what's going on here, nothing I say has been approved by Inslee's Ministry of COVID Compliance. So just to verify, if you only want to hear what Governor Inslee wants you to hear, you better stop watching right now. Because generally what we're finding is that what Governor Inslee wants you to hear is anything that is scary and willing to get you distracted from basically the incompetence and typical failings that his agencies and departments seem to display on a regular basis. The last thing he wants you to know is the escalating crime wave throughout the state, the radical explosion of homeless junkie camps all over the place, and of course that missing $1 billion. Where did it go from the Employment Security Department? Well, who knows? So, as always, anything that he is saying and anything that the state's pushing out is approved by the Ministry of COVID Compliance, and so we really have some differences of opinion here. But let's start out with an approved message from Governor Inslee's office that caused this question to be raised. And it really comes back to a recent job posting that the State Department of Health made for a quarantine strike team consultant. Very scary term. Isolation and quarantine strike team consultant that they wanted to hire down in Lewis County. And this was very scary. And it was even scarier when the Department of Health went back and realized that that was probably a little too scary. And they decided to use a isolation and quarantine team consultant instead. They took out the scary words of strike team, which was kind of exciting and cool, but that's how they had it originally listed, which then of course led to articles about how they stealth change their listing as they're trying to hire these employees for the Department of Health to work in these secretive isolation and quarantine facilities in Centralia, which is down in Lewis County. So let's explore this and let's talk about it a little bit more. Centralia is actually a town just across the border in Lewis County. I live in Thurston County. This is actually only about 20 minutes from my house, and so it's relatively close by. And so I can go down and take a look. Let's see what was going on down there. And I did. I went down this morning before I did this video, and I took a photo of the COVID quarantine facility that indeed does exist there at the Lakeview Inn. And it turns out that this is a facility the Department of Health is leasing currently. They put up those scary fence panels there, and they have about 40 rooms here, and they've had somewhere between 8 and 20 people there, 25 people at any given time, mostly who they define by their own terms as people who are not under the jurisdiction of Washington State. I think that usually means that they're non-U.S. citizens. Maybe they were caught trying to come across the border and they tested positive for COVID or whatever, and they have some other kind of undefined reasons, but they'll put them here instead of quarantining at home, which is what most people do when they realize they've been tested and they have it. So let's look at this a little bit closer, because this really isn't a super fancy place. It's kind of a no-tell motel located along I-5. And I like this aerial image because this is a good way of just seeing what it looks like. You can see I-5 right there. It's just a small little, not a fancy place. You drive by it and don't even notice it's there. It's on a little reservoir. It's across, the other side of I-5 is actually Fort Boris Park, and it's just right in the middle of Centralia, and that's where they decided to locate it. And this is kind of an old story because this actually started back in May earlier this year, and what happened is the Department of Health put in this facility here without notifying the Lewis County Commissioners or the Centralia City Council, at least not with much warning, and they were relatively upset about it, and then so the Department of Health had to apologize for being kind of heavy-handed in the typical way that state government is in Washington State, and this generated pushback, of course, from the elected officials. Lewis County said they don't want it. They don't want this quarantine facility. You can see the date there is May 20th, so it was a number of months ago that they had this kind of dust up, and it stretched into June when the Washington State Secretary of Health came down there and spoke to the county commissioners over this Centralia isolation facility. The state, or the Congresswoman, Jamie Herrera Butler, actually got involved at the time, questioning why the state was locating this in Lewis County. Most of the controversy at the time had to do with the people that the State Department of Health was bringing in actually didn't live in Lewis County at all. Some of them were from Whatcom County or from King County, and so Lewis County felt like they were being picked on to locate this facility here. So that was a drama that kind of went on for several months. When I did talk to the county commissioners, one of the county commissioners from Lewis County recently, he indicated that they did catch the Department of Health lying about the contract dates on this, and that there is some bad blood really between the elected officials and the State Department of Health for locating this facility here. But that's what's there. This is located here. They are hiring these strike team, or they at least has the term they put on, the strike team consultants. And that's really what generated this concern. It popped it up on the news again. And as best I can tell at this point in time, the scary term strike team was put in by an overzealous employee at the Department of Health because it is a thankless and boring job that they're trying to hire for, and they wanted to make it sound like it was actually fairly interesting. And I don't know if they've been playing video games too much and they put the strike team in there to be scary. There's really nothing terribly interesting about this position or what they're doing other than supposedly managing this Lakeview Hotel and squandering lots of your tax dollars to do it. So that's what's actually going on down here. But to some extent, this is a little bit of an echo from articles and stories that had popped up last year around March or so, when the early days of kind of the drama of COVID, we didn't quite know what it was, and this lockdown was going on, and people suddenly discovered that there was, further up I-5 in Thurston County, at the old Maple Lane facility, that there was a old Department of Corrections facility there for juveniles that was being turned into a quarantine facility, and that's true. That's actually what the Department of Health was doing at the time. And it was kind of I'm familiar with this facility because when I was on the school board in the Rochester School District, this was a juvenile detention facility. And so it was our responsibility, the school board, to educate the kids that were actually the minors that were locked up there. And they had just shut it down when I got on the school board about a year before, so we're still dealing with that process. I've had tours of the facility. Sat there empty for many, many years. And recently the Department of Corrections had been starting to reopen it, and they had some plans to use it for some select populations of the inmates. And this facility, by the way, has been there for decades. It's nothing secret. It's nothing hidden. It's easy to find. All you have to do is drive over to it. And it was mysteriously rediscovered by apparently some writers last year. And there was big concern that this was being used as a secret FEMA detention camp or something like that. And I went up there to take photos with it. Again, it's just a few miles from my house, so I went and took photos of it last year. And this is one of those pictures that I took. And you can see that they were locating these RVs in there, and they were doing this kind of quarantine operation that really never went anywhere. This was early days of COVID, and they were going to try to lock it down because they thought they could prevent COVID from going anywhere. And yet, of course, the cat was out of the bag. It was everywhere. They couldn't stop it. It was far more widespread than anybody had realized at the time. And in fact, newspaper reporters, you can kind of see right here, they went over and had a big interview in front. This is a big press conference, and I took photos of them there as well. They were at the facility at the same time. I will just make a quick point here for anybody looking at this because it dates itself. Remember when the CDC came out and said, hey, masks don't work for COVID at all? This is in that era. So all these reporters there were doing this big press conference. Nobody's wearing masks, and because the CDC said they don't work. And this is a picture of them outside of the Maple Lane facility talking about how they were going to try to use this as a quarantine facility. That didn't last long, and they didn't use it. They didn't really do much there, but that was the drama and the interest of the time. The reason why I took those facility photos at the time is I was doing an article on the Evergreen State College last year and did a video on this about turning the Evergreen State College into a quarantine facility. It's a better way to use that 1,000-acre piece of property, and it just seemed like a better use to me than this Maple Lane facility. And so that was that was the point of that video at the time. And instead what happened is just students just got all maxed up. They put masks on, and then they shut the school down. And so at least they went full remote on the school. And there we are. Back to the question. Are they actually opening up camps, COVID quarantine isolation camps, for all those of us who did not get the vax, and are they planning to put us in them? Well, according to elected officials down there, and I don't believe the local elected officials would be lying about this, they said no, it's not happening. Nothing like that's happening. You have the one kind of no-tell motel, the Lakeview Inn, that is being used as this little facility, and it's been kind of a drama now for many months, but that's about all that's going on. There's nothing else like these kind of lockdown camps that are out there. The Maple Lane facility is being used by the Department of Corrections up across the border in Thurston County, and they're expanding it according to the plans that the Department of Corrections has had for the last decade or so, since they shut down the juvenile detention element of it. But no big plans at this point in time for using that for the unvaxxed. However, I do have to point out, and I'll add this little caveat, not yet. And the only reason why I say that isn't to scare people or anything, but we've just been dealing with this strange world here where we really can't trust government because we keep catching them lying or misleading or saying things all the time. And so, well, this rumor may not be true that they're opening up these facilities all over Lewis County. That's not happening. Anyway, I've looked into it. It's not happening right now. But if you look at some of the laws that are on the books right now, there's some big concerns that I have, and other legislators have had these concerns as well as we've kind of looked at this over the last year. And one of them specifically is concerning, and it's WAC, which stands for Washington Administrative Code 246-100-40. And I encourage everybody to look there. I'm going to link to it down in the video description below if you want to learn a little bit more about this. And it's under the Health Department rules regarding the procedures for isolation or quarantine. And there's a sequence of these WACs, and WACs are essentially administrative code that is written by the agencies to fulfill legislation that's been passed at some point in time by the legislature. This specific WAC was updated in 2003, so it's not. This was done quite a while ago. But if you read the specific language there about involuntary quarantine and the ability to actually take people against their will and put them into some kind of a quarantine facility, that is very concerning. It's an excessive amount of power being given to bureaucrats who have demonstrated recently, especially, that they can't be trusted or you can't believe what they say anyway. We've had enough instances already in our state of them lying about statistics, lying about COVID deaths, for example, and number of times that's come up, and lying about deadlines and lying about the rules and lying about other things. And I think that there's some general recognition now that we're going to have to go back in and change some of these rules because this ability to involuntarily take people and throw them into these situations, even if it hasn't been used yet, is still a concern to let the bureaucrats have that kind of power. After all, we're seeing that they're happy to, in being led by Inslee, they're happy to destroy our freedoms and liberties at every opportunity and chance they get, destroying businesses, threatening people with being fired, and doing things that have never actually been done in the history of the state of Washington before. This seems to be Inslee's primary operating mode moving forward. He just wants to keep grabbing more and more power, and with a political opposition that is both spineless and almost ineffective and invisible many times, he's getting away with it so far. And this is most obvious last January when, for the first time in state history, he decided to surround the Capitol with National Guard and big fences and locked all the people out of the legislative session and the legislators out of the legislative session, turned it into a big Zoom session so they could mute all opposition, silence anybody who had a difference of opinion, and pass through probably one of the worst agendas that we've ever seen in state history. Nobody's ever done this before, so this is extreme behavior. And so when Inslee's saying that it's good to be king, many of us believe it, and we're concerned about it. That's why we're raising the attention on the bad things that he is doing and the harmful things that he's causing in the state of Washington. However, this little isolation camp that exists right now, this little no-tell motel down there, Lakeview Inn, is not a great threat to the state, not at this point in time. And in fact, when I went by there today, it looked like there were very few people there, and most of the time it has only been at half occupancy, if even that. But I'm sure that the owners of the property were pretty happy to get this lease because I don't think there was a lot of business going on there anyway. And there's nothing unusual about the state wasting your tax dollars on something like this and using any excuse to waste it. So that is going on, but it's not the big camps that people have been rumor mongering around the state. And one of the things that motivated me to do this video too, and I didn't say this in the beginning, but I was getting people calling me worried about that they were going to be thrown in the camps because they were unvaccinated. That's not happening. I have no evidence of that happening right now, and if I do, I will do a video, and then I guess they'll throw me in the camp after that. So, but I'll do a video about it. I'll definitely report on it if I can find it. But this right now is not a legitimate rumor, and I don't think what's going on here is it's annoying and probably a waste of money, but I don't think that that's the end of the world or an indication of the collapse of some kind of terrible situation coming down the road. But I will end this video, as I do all videos, because this is something to remember. We have got to remember that the future belongs to those who show up. We have to make a difference. You and I probably recognize a lot of the problems that have happened in the state and been highlighted by some bad behavior of government. We have to show up and make that difference, and the future belongs to those who show up. So we have to go and start pushing back on some of these issues as we discover them. So if you want to learn more, go to wethegovern.com. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to support We the Govern, there's also a way to do that down in the description below. And please feel free to share this video with as many other people who are concerned about being thrown in those camps, just like you might be. Share it with them, and I challenge anybody to find something that I have missed, and I'm happy to report on that as well. Thank you very much for watching.